My mother-in-law had a key for emergencies. She used it to turn my house into an Airbnb. The key was supposed to be for emergencies. A broken pipe, a forgotten package, a quick check while we were away. I trusted my mother-in-law with that key because she was family, and family was supposed to be the one thing you could count on. When my husband and I left for our 2-week anniversary trip, I felt nothing but relief knowing someone responsible was keeping an eye on our home. I pictured her watering my plants, collecting the mail, maybe turning on a light or two so the house didn't look empty. I didn't picture her turning our home into a vacation rental. I didn't picture strangers sleeping in our bed, eating off our plates, using our towels. When we pulled into the driveway at midnight, exhausted and happy, we found a couple standing on our front porch, confused and angry, holding a key that looked exactly like ours. They had booked our house through an online rental platform, and my mother-in-law had collected every dollar. The flight home from our anniversary trip had been delayed twice, and by the time we finally landed, my bones felt like they were made of lead. 14 days of sun, sand, and complete disconnection from the real world had been exactly what we needed. My husband Bennett and I had spent our 2-week vacation rediscovering each other, rekindling the spark that had gotten buried under work deadlines and daily responsibilities. We had laughed more than we had in months. We had slept in late, eaten food we couldn't pronounce, and made promises to each other about slowing down once we got home. I was exhausted, sure, but I was also the happiest I had been in a long time. As the taxi pulled through our neighborhood, I felt a wave of comfort wash over me. The familiar streets, the old oak trees, the little yellow house on the corner that always had the best Halloween decorations. Home. I was finally home. I leaned my head against Bennett's shoulder and smiled. "It's good to be back," I murmured. He kissed the top of my head. "It is, but I'm already planning our next trip, somewhere even more remote. Maybe an island with no cell service?" I laughed and squeezed his hand. "Deal." The taxi stopped in front of our house, a modest craftsman bungalow with a wraparound porch and a garden I had spent 3 years perfecting. The porch light was on, just as I had asked my mother-in-law Harriet to leave it. Everything looked exactly as we had left it. The hydrangeas were blooming. The welcome mat was in its usual place. The swing on the porch swayed gently in the evening breeze. It wasn't until we were walking up the path that I noticed something strange. There were 2 suitcases on the porch. Not ours. 2 large, expensive-looking suitcases that definitely did not belong to us. I stopped mid-step, my hand still gripping the handle of my own luggage. "Bennett," I said slowly, "do you recognize those?" He squinted at them, then shook his head. "No, maybe Mom left them here? She was supposed to check on the house while we were gone." "Check on the house," I repeated. "Not move in." We approached the front door, and I fumbled in my purse for my keys. But before I could unlock it, the door swung open from the inside. A woman stood in the doorway. She was middle-aged, wearing a floral robe, and she looked at us with the kind of confusion that suggested we were the ones intruding. Behind her, I could see a man sitting on our couch, watching television on our television. "Our couch. Our television. Can I help you?" the woman asked, her voice guarded. I blinked, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" The woman's confusion deepened. "Who am I? Who are you? We rented this house for the week. The owner was very clear that we would have complete privacy." Bennett stepped forward, his voice tight but controlled. "I think there's been a mistake. This is our house. We own this house. Who rented it to you?" The woman's face went pale. She turned and called over her shoulder. Frank, come here." The man on the couch rose and ambled over, his expression shifting from annoyed to alarmed as he took in the scene. He was wearing my husband's slippers. I recognized them. They were the ones I had bought Bennett for Christmas last year, the fleece-lined ones with the little anchors on them. "These people say they own the house," the woman said, her voice rising in panic. Frank looked at us, then at the house, then back at us. "We booked this through an online platform. We paid good money. The host had great reviews." The phrase hit me like a bucket of ice water. Online platform, host, great reviews. I pushed past them and stepped into my own home, my eyes darting around the room. Everything was different. Our family photos were gone, replaced by generic art prints. Our throw pillows had been replaced with cheap, mismatched ones. There was a welcome basket on the coffee table with a note that read, "Enjoy your stay." In handwriting I recognized immediately, Harriet's handwriting. I snatched up the note and stared at it, my hands trembling. "Enjoy your stay," I read aloud. "Please make yourself at home. The Wi-Fi password is on the refrigerator. Checkout is at 11. Thank you for choosing this lovely property." Bennett took the note from my hands and read it, his face going from confusion to disbelief to pure, unadulterated fury. "Mom," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "she did this. She rented out our house." The couple, Frank and his wife, whose name I still hadn't learned, were standing in the doorway, looking increasingly alarmed. Frank was holding a phone to his ear, presumably calling the rental platform to report a dispute. I didn't care. All I could think about was how many strangers had slept in my bed, eaten off my plates, used my towels. "Please," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, "I need you to pack your things and leave. This is my home. We didn't authorize this rental." "I'm so sorry, but you need to go." The woman's face crumpled. "We have nowhere to go. It's midnight. We drove 8 hours to get here." Bennett stepped in, his voice gentler than mine had been. "I understand this is a terrible situation, but you can't stay here. We'll help you find a hotel. We'll call around, but you have to leave." It took another hour to get them out. They packed their things, grumbling and shooting us dirty looks as if we were the ones who had caused the problem. Bennett called 3 hotels before he found one with a vacancy, and he offered to pay for their first night. They accepted begrudgingly, taking our number in case they needed to contact us about their refund. Frank, the husband, gave us one last look before he walked out the door. You might want to talk to your host about this. She's got a whole calendar of bookings. My stomach dropped. A whole calendar? Frank shrugged. She was booking weekends, weekdays, holidays. She told us she had a full schedule. Made a killing, I'm sure. The door closed behind them, and Bennett and I were left alone in our own house. Our house that looked nothing like our house. Our house that had been turned into a hotel without our knowledge or consent. I walked slowly through the rooms, cataloging the changes. The guest room had been converted into a second bedroom, with a cheap inflatable mattress and new sheets I had never seen before. The kitchen cabinets were stocked with mini shampoo bottles and tiny soaps. There was a guest book on the counter with entries from people I had never met, gushing about how wonderful their stay had been. I opened the guest book to the first entry and read it aloud. What a beautiful home. The host was so welcoming and made sure we had everything we needed. Highly recommend this property for a relaxing getaway. The handwriting was Harriet's. She wrote her own reviews, I said, my voice hollow. She wrote fake reviews for her own rental business. Bennett had been silent for the past 10 minutes. His jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. When he finally spoke, his voice was hard and cold. I'm calling her. Right now. He pulled out his phone and dialed his mother's number. It rang 3 times before she picked up, her voice bright and cheerful. Bennett, you're back. How was your trip? Did you have a wonderful time? Mom, he said, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Did you rent out our house to strangers? There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a small nervous laugh. Oh, honey, I was going to tell you about that. I was going to surprise you with the money. Surprise us? You turned our home into a hotel. Strangers slept in our bed. They used our things. We came home to find people living in our house. Harriet's voice shifted, becoming defensive. Well, you were gone, and the house was empty. It seemed like such a waste. I thought I was helping. I made a lot of money, Bennett. Enough to pay for your next vacation. You should be thanking me, not yelling at me. I took the phone from Bennett's hand, my voice calm but cold. Harriet, I need you to listen to me. You had a key for emergencies. You used it to commit fraud. You rented out our home without our permission. That is not helping. That is stealing. The line went silent for a moment. Then Harriet's voice returned, this time with an edge of fury. Stealing? I was helping you. You're so ungrateful, both of you. I did all that work, cleaning the house, managing the bookings, dealing with the guests. And this is the thanks I get? The key, I said, ignoring her rant. I want the key back, right now. And I want a full accounting of every single booking you made, every dollar you collected. You will give it back to us, or I will involve the authorities. Harriet laughed. A sharp, brittle sound. You wouldn't dare. I'm your mother-in-law. Family doesn't involve the authorities. I hung up without responding. Bennett was staring at me, his face a mixture of shock and fear. Are you really going to call the police? I looked around my home, the home I had built, the home that had been violated in the most intimate way. Strangers had slept in my bed. Strangers had used my things. And the woman who had allowed it was standing there, pretending she had done us a favor. Someone has to stop her, Bennett, I said quietly. And if you won't, I will. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for the first time in 2 weeks, but it didn't feel like my own bed. The sheets were wrong. The pillows smelled like someone else's shampoo. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sleeping in a hotel room, not my home. Bennett was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. He hadn't slept much either. I called her back this morning, he said, his voice hoarse. She won't give me a straight answer about how much money she made. She just keeps saying she was trying to help. I sat up and rubbed my eyes. We need to find out. We need to know how many people stayed here, how long they stayed, what she did with the money, and we need to change the locks. Bennett nodded slowly. I'll call a locksmith. But what about the money? What do we do if she won't give it back? I had been thinking about this all night. The answer was clear even if it was painful. We tell her that if she doesn't return every single dollar she made from renting out our house, we'll file a police report, and we'll follow through. I'm not bluffing. Bennett looked at me, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. Harriet was his mother. He loved her, despite everything. But he also loved me, and he knew I was right. What she had done was wrong. It was illegal. It was a violation that couldn't be undone with an apology. Okay, he said finally. I'll call her. I'll give her one chance to make it right. He called her on speakerphone so I could hear the conversation. Harriet picked up on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful, as if nothing had happened. Bennett, I was just thinking about you. I found the most adorable little coffee shop near your house. Maybe we can meet for lunch? Mom, he said, his voice firm. We need to talk about the rental situation. You need to give us the money you made, every single dollar, and you need to tell us how many bookings you had. There was a long pause. When Harriet spoke again, her voice had lost its brightness. I don't have the money anymore, dear. I used it. Used it for what? I interjected, unable to stay silent. There was another pause. Then Harriet's voice came through, small and defensive. I had some debts, credit cards. Nothing serious. Just a few $1,000s. I thought I could pay them off with the rental income and then give you the rest. But there wasn't much left over after I covered everything. Bennett's face went pale. How much debt, Mom? How much did you owe? About $12,000, she admitted. But I paid it all off. You should be proud of me. I took care of my own problems without bothering you. I felt like I was going to be sick. $12,000. She had made $12,000 off our home, and she had spent it all. Every single penny. Mom, Bennett said, his voice shaking with barely controlled anger. "You can't just take our house and turn it into a business without asking. You can't make money off our property and then spend it all. That's theft." "It's not theft," Harriet snapped. "It's family. I helped you. I did all the work. I managed the bookings. I cleaned the house. I handled the guests. You just sat on a beach and did nothing. I earned that money." I stood up and walked to the other side of the room, my heart pounding. She genuinely believed she was in the right. She had taken our home, turned it into a rental property, pocketed the profits, and now she was telling us we should be grateful. "Harriet," I said, my voice as calm as I could make it, "you need to give us the money. You need to tell us exactly how many bookings you had, and you need to give us back the key. If you don't, we're going to the police." She laughed, but there was a hint of nervousness in it. "You wouldn't do that. You're family." "Family doesn't do this," I replied. "Family doesn't betray trust like this. Family doesn't turn your home into a hotel without asking. You crossed a line, and you need to fix it." The call ended with Harriet promising to send us a list of the bookings. She didn't apologize. She didn't say she was sorry. She just said she would send the list and then hung up. 3 hours later, an email arrived. The list was longer than I had expected. Over the 2 weeks we were gone, Harriet had booked our house 6 times. 6 different groups of strangers had stayed in our home. They had slept in our bed, eaten off our plates, used our towels, and left their mark on every single room. I scrolled through the names and dates, my stomach churning. There were couples, families, even a group of college students who had apparently thrown a party in our backyard. I found photos online, posted by guests, showing our home being used as a backdrop for someone else's vacation memories. Bennett was silent as he looked over my shoulder. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "We need to change the locks. Today." The locksmith came within 2 hours. He was a kindly older man who didn't ask questions as he replaced every single lock in the house. I watched him work, feeling a small sense of relief with each new key he handed me. The house was ours again. The key was ours again. Harriet no longer had access, but the damage had been done. I couldn't walk into my own kitchen without thinking about strangers cooking in my pots. I couldn't sit on my couch without wondering if someone had spilled wine on it. I couldn't sleep in my bed without feeling like I was lying in someone else's sheets. Bennett and I tried to move on. We washed everything, scrubbed everything, replaced the pillows and the sheets and the towels. We redecorated, making the house feel like ours again. But the sense of violation lingered, a shadow that followed me from room to room. A week later, I discovered the final insult. I was cleaning out the hall closet, looking for a spare set of sheets when I found a hidden envelope tucked behind some old coats. Inside was a stack of cash, about $2,000, with a note in Harriet's handwriting, "For emergencies. You never know when you might need it." She had hidden money in my house, money she had made off my house. She had left it there like it was a gift, like I should be grateful. I stared at the note, my hands shaking, and felt a cold fury settle over me. I called Bennett and told him to come home. When he arrived, I showed him the money and the note. He read it, his face going through a series of expressions I couldn't read. "She thought she was helping," he said finally. "She thought she was being generous." "Bennett, she is not a good person," I said, my voice cracking with emotion. "She is manipulative and selfish, and she doesn't care about our boundaries. She doesn't care about us. She only cares about what she wants." He pulled me into a hug, his arms wrapped tightly around me. I know. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." It was the beginning of a very long conversation. A conversation about boundaries, about trust, about what we were willing to tolerate from his mother. It was a conversation that would take months to finish, that would test our marriage in ways I hadn't expected. But in that moment, standing in my own hallway, holding cash my mother-in-law had hidden in my house, I made a decision. I would not let her win. I would not let her destroy my home or my marriage. I would fight back, and it started with that stack of cash. I held the envelope of cash in my hand for a long time, feeling the weight of it, the weight of everything Harriet had done. $2,000 hidden in my closet like a secret, like a bribe, like an admission of guilt she wasn't brave enough to say aloud. Bennett stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder, his presence the only thing keeping me from completely unraveling. "I need to go see her," I said finally. "I need to talk to her face to face. I need to look her in the eyes and tell her what she did to us." Bennett hesitated. "Are you sure that's a good idea? You know how she gets. She'll cry. She'll play the victim. She'll make you feel like you're the one who's wrong." I turned to face him, my jaw set. "I don't care how she gets. I need to do this. For me. For us. I need to see her and tell her that this is over. No more keys. No more access. No more pretending she's helping when she's only helping herself." Bennett nodded slowly. "I'll come with you." We drove to Harriet's house in silence. It was the same colonial mansion where the rehearsal dinner had been held, the same perfectly manicured lawn, the same crystal chandeliers visible through the front windows. It had always felt like a showpiece, a house designed to impress rather than to live in. Now it just felt like a stage for one woman's elaborate performance. Harriet opened the door before we even knocked, as if she had been watching for us. Her face was arranged in an expression of wounded dignity, the same mask she wore whenever she was about to be confronted with the consequences of her own actions. "Bennett, sweetheart," she said, reaching for him. "I was so hoping you would come. I've been worried sick about you." I stepped in front of him, blocking her path. "We need to talk, Harriet, inside." Her eyes flicked to the envelope in my hand, and I saw a flash of recognition cross her face. She knew what I was holding. She had probably been wondering when I would find it. Come in," she said, her voice overly bright. "I just made some tea. We can sit down and have a nice chat like the family we are." We followed her into the living room, a space so carefully decorated that it felt more like a showroom than a place where people actually live. I sat on the edge of an antique sofa, Bennett beside me. Harriet took the armchair across from us, her hands folded primly in her lap. "I found your money," I said, holding up the envelope. "The cash you hid in my house." Harriet's smile didn't waver. "Oh, that was just a little surprise. I thought you might like to treat yourselves to something special after the trip. A nice dinner, maybe. A weekend getaway." "Don't," I said, my voice sharp. "Don't pretend this was a gift. You made money off our house. You turned our home into a hotel without our permission. And now you're trying to pretend you were being generous." Harriet's smile faltered. She looked to Bennett, her eyes pleading. Bennett talked to her. "You know I would never do anything to hurt you. I was trying to help. I had all those debts, and I was so ashamed. I didn't want to bother you with my problems. I thought I could fix everything on my own." Bennett's voice was quiet but firm. "Mom, you can't fix your problems by creating new ones for us. You rented out our home without asking. You had strangers in our house. We didn't get to enjoy our own home when we came back because we were too busy scrubbing it clean of everyone else's presence." Harriet's eyes filled with tears, the same tears I had seen 100 times before. It was her favorite weapon, the tool she used to deflect blame and elicit sympathy. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to help. I wanted to be useful. I feel like I'm losing my son, and I thought if I could do something for you, you would see how much I love you." I watched her cry, and for a long moment, I felt nothing. No sympathy, no guilt, no desire to comfort her. All I felt was exhaustion. "Harriet," I said, my voice calm, "I need you to tell me exactly how much money you made, not the debts you paid off, the total amount you collected, and I need you to tell me how many bookings you had." She sniffled, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief she had pulled from her sleeve. "I don't remember exactly. It was just a few people. A few bookings. The list you sent us said 6 bookings. I countered. 6 different groups of strangers in our home. How much did you make?" Harriet's face went pale. She looked at Bennett, then back at me, and I saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. She was trying to figure out how much she could get away with. "About 15,000. She admitted. "Maybe a little more." I felt the air leave my lungs. $15,000. She had made $15,000 off our home, and she had spent it all without a second thought. "That money belongs to us, Harriet," I said. "You need to pay it back, every single dollar. And you need to sign a document stating that you will never enter our home without our explicit permission again." Harriet laughed, a brittle, disbelieving sound. "You can't be serious. I'm your mother-in-law. You can't make me sign a document like that." "We can," Bennett said, his voice firm. "And we will. If you don't agree, we're going to the police. We're going to file a report. And we're going to make sure everyone knows what you did." Harriet stared at him, her mouth open, her tears forgotten. "You would do that to me? Your own mother?" "You did this to yourself, Mom," Bennett said. "You made choices. You knew what you were doing was wrong, and you did it anyway. This is the consequence." The negotiation took 3 hours. Harriet cried, argued, begged, and accused. She tried guilt. She tried anger. She tried playing the victim. But Bennett and I held firm. We didn't give in. We didn't back down. In the end, Harriet agreed to repay the money in monthly installments. She signed a document stating that she would not enter our home without our written permission. She handed over all copies of our house key. When we finally walked out of her house, I felt like I had just run a marathon. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but I was also relieved. The boundaries had been set. The line had been drawn. It took months for Harriet to make the first payment. She complained about the cost, called us ungrateful, told the rest of the family that we were cruel and unreasonable, but she paid. Slowly, reluctantly, but she paid. We also made other changes. We installed a security system. We added cameras at every entrance. We changed our passwords, our account numbers, everything she could have had access to. Our home was no longer vulnerable. Bennett and I went to therapy, both individually and together. We talked about trust. We talked about boundaries. We talked about the difficulty of setting limits with family members who didn't respect them. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the weight of the conflict felt too heavy to carry. But every time I walked into my home and smelled the familiar scent of our own laundry detergent, every time I sat on our couch without wondering if someone had been there before me, I felt a little stronger. A year later, Harriet had repaid most of the money. She had stopped complaining, though she still made passive-aggressive comments at family dinners. I had learned to let them slide off me. Her words didn't have power over me anymore. Bennett and I had also started planning our next vacation. We were going to a cabin in the mountains, isolated and peaceful. And this time, we weren't giving anyone a key, because some lessons once learned are never forgotten. Trust is earned, boundaries are essential, and family doesn't have the right to take what isn't theirs, no matter how much they say they love you. The house was ours again. The home was ours again, and that was a victory worth fighting for.